you, everyone. So I'll be talking today about how we can rewire our brains for peace. And I would argue with you that one of the most important frontiers in peace building is how we understand the processes going on inside our brains as we make peace and we begin to build peace from the inside out to the larger processes in which we are engaged. Next slide, please. So there's a whole group now of neuroscientists who call themselves social neuroscientists, who are translating what they're learning about the parts of our brain involved both with peace, but also with anger, fear, trauma, and empathy. And are learning things, for example, about how if you build empathy within your own in-group, sometimes that comes at the expense of your relationship with an out-group. You build empathy within, but antipathy to larger groups. Or they're looking at issues like sacred values, and how if you're negotiating over a value that you take to be sacred, doing the kind of instrumental negotiation you do to buy your car, for example, can actually make you resist negotiation. How dare you negotiate with my sacred values? So we're learning a great deal about our lizard brain, fear, what happens to our kind of cognitive rational responses in a time of fear, about how trauma is actually passed epigenetically from generation to generation. So we asked ourselves at the Alliance for Peacebuilding, what are the antidotes to the changes in the brain that we know occur through times of fear and violence and trauma? So we developed a program called Rewiring the Brain for Peace, where we have brought neuroscientists, peace builders, and spiritual leaders from around the world to look at the intersection between these three fields. We're defining spirituality not strictly as religion, and not strictly as contemplative practice. You can imagine a whole spectrum from religion through mindfulness, yoga. But we assert that every culture, every society has certain rituals, ways that they make meaning, ways that they make sense of the world and bring people together, create certain safe spaces in which peace can happen. So we are looking at that intersection of peace building, neuroscience, and spirituality. Can you keep going ahead? Yeah. So our theory is that how do spiritual rituals, experiences, and values present in different cultures affect emotional and cognitive processes, contribute to transforming behaviors, attitudes, and relationships, and I would add narratives to that, and have the potential to facilitate peace-building processes. So we've come up with 7 hypotheses that run from the role that ritual plays in helping to center you, to calm some of those more, those fear responses, and to make you even open to accepting a peace-building process. This then goes from internal to external through rituals, through their predictability, create safe spaces where there can be a transmission of values, a transmission of narrative, where your fear responses are dampened, and so you can accept a broader narrative. They then became an important space in which to transmit values, and those values perhaps are more related to peace. And finally, there's a possibility of transcendence, that if you can start to take those rituals, develop more of a collective mindset, you can transcend whatever your particular in-group is to more of an inclusive kind of environment in which you can make peace. The problem is that sometimes these can be used for evil as well as for good. When you study radicalization, often they are using different kinds of rituals, different ways to damp down fear for malign purposes. We're trying to look at the positive purposes. Next slide, please. So this is a map. We did a literature review of 900 peer-reviewed articles that we thought were related to the neuroscience, spirituality, and peace building. It's hard to see some of these nodes, but they're around what is the role of certain brain areas, like the anterior cingulate cortex? How do we look at issues around pro-social behavior? How do we look at personal transformation? And this will soon be up, and you can actually go and click and find out some of these interesting connections you might not see just from reading the literature itself. Next slide, please. To give you some idea of how we're actually applying this in the world, we're working with Vinya Ariadne from Sarvodaya in Sri Lanka, who works on group meditation. And how can you create social change and development through spiritual practice? With Peacebuilding Lane, who works with indigenous populations in Canada, the United States, to take rituals from American and Canadian Indians for peace. The George Family Foundation is working with populations in Minneapolis. And finally, in Bogota, Colombia, the Fundación para la Reconciliación, which is looking at the neuroscience of forgiveness. And I encourage all of you to work with us. We want to make this a very inclusive space. Thank you.